Take a look at any map of the world from the late 19th century. It tells a story of breathtaking ambition and brutal conquest. This was the high noon of imperialism, an era where the roaring furnaces of the Industrial Revolution created an insatiable hunger for resources, new markets, and national prestige. Europe's great powers, armed with new technology and a sense of cultural superiority, were locked in a fierce competition, a great game played on a global scale. The world was carved up like a great feast, with empires rising on the backs of conquered nations. From the scramble for Africa to the subjugation of India and the forced opening of China, the logic of the age was absolute: expand or be extinguished. Africa, India, the Americas, and the rich lands of Southeast Asia were all being systematically consumed. The appetite of the empires was insatiable. Burma, after 3 bloody wars, British, the ancient kingdoms of Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, forcibly bundled into French Indochina, the Malay states to the south, British, the vast archipelago of Indonesia, Dutch, the Philippines, Spanish, then American. The pattern was undeniable, but squeezed between these advancing giants, a puzzle, an anomaly, a survivor, a kingdom that, by all the rules of the 19th century, simply shouldn't exist. This is the story of how Siam, the kingdom we now call Thailand, played the greatest game of geopolitical chess in history, and against all odds, won. By the late 1800s, Siam found itself in the worst possible position on the planet, the literal buffer zone between 2 ravenous, competing European superpowers. To the west, the British Empire, having swallowed Burma, was pushing eastward. To the east, the French, having consolidated their hold on Indochina, were pushing west up the Mekong River. Siam was the prize caught in the middle. It was only a matter of time, right? The logic of the era was simple, brutal, and seemingly inescapable. If you're not a colonizer, you become the colonized. There was no third option, but Siam had a secret weapon. It wasn't a massive army or a mighty navy capable of repelling the Europeans. It had something far more valuable, far more potent: brilliant, forward-thinking leadership. 2 kings in particular, a father and son duo from the Chakri dynasty, who understood that, to survive, they couldn't fight the storm head-on. They had to learn to sail in it, to harness its winds, and to navigate its treacherous currents. The strategy began with King Mongkut, or Rama IV. Before ascending the throne, he spent 27 years as a Buddhist monk, but this was no retreat from the world. His monastery became a laboratory where he mastered English, Latin, astronomy, and Western science. He studied the West with a scholar's precision, understanding its power, motivations, and fatal arrogance. He even famously exchanged letters with President Lincoln, offering war elephants to help with the Civil War. When he became king, he knew that the traditional policy of isolation, which had worked for centuries, now meant certain annihilation. So he opened Siam to the West, but on his own terms. He signed the pivotal Bowring Treaty with Britain in 1855. It was an unequal treaty, granting the British trading concessions and legal privileges. But Mongkut saw it as a calculated sacrifice. He gave them what they wanted, trade, to avoid them taking what they truly needed, the entire country. He was buying time, but it was his son, King Chulalongkorn, Rama V, who would become the true genius of this survival strategy. Reigning for an incredible 42 years, he had been meticulously prepared by his father. He was sent on tours of British Singapore, Java, and India. He saw colonialism firsthand, not as an abstract threat, but as a working system of subjugation, studying its machinery, administration strengths, and weaknesses. He saw the colonial game for what it was: a relentless land grab justified by a narrative of civilizing the backward peoples of the world. So, he made the ultimate calculated move. He decided to give land away. It sounds insane, counterintuitive, but it was a brilliant strategy. Sacrifice the limbs to save the heart. He ceded vast territories which were historically vassal states to the French in Laos and Cambodia. These were painful losses, a blow to the kingdom's prestige. He gave the British control over several Malay sultanates in the south. These weren't signs of weakness, they were masterstrokes of geopolitical realism. He strategically shrank his kingdom's traditional sphere of influence to create a smaller, more defensible, modern nation-state, turning existential threats into mere border disputes. With each concession, he satisfied the empire's hunger just enough to make conquering the core of Siam, the rice-rich Chao Phraya Basin, a costly and complicated affair. He made Siam more valuable to both Britain and France as an independent, stable buffer state than as another costly colony to administer and defend against the other. But giving away land wasn't enough. The Europeans still saw Siam as a backwards, uncivilized nation, which was their classic excuse for colonization. They used this justification all over the world. So Chulalongkorn launched a breathtakingly fast and comprehensive modernization campaign to rob them of that excuse. He abolished slavery, a deeply entrenched institution, through a careful, gradual process that avoided a civil war with his own nobility. He dismantled the old feudal administration and reformed the entire government, creating a modern cabinet of ministries and a professional, centralized bureaucracy. He built railways, telegraph lines, a postal service, and modern infrastructure, physically connecting his kingdom and demonstrating its progress. He hired European advisors, Belgians for law, Danes for the navy, Germans for railways, but always kept them in advisory roles, never command. He established modern schools and sent his sons and the nobility's sons to be educated in Europe, creating a new generation of loyal, Western-educated administrators. He was sending a clear, undeniable message to London and Paris. You have no excuse. We are not a backward kingdom to be civilized. We are a modern sovereign nation, just like you. He was playing their game, by their rules, and he was winning. The ultimate test came in 1893 in what became known as the Paknam Incident. The French, hungry for more territory and eager to test Siam's resolve, fabricated a crisis over minor border skirmishes and sent 2 gunboats steaming towards Bangkok. It was a blatant show of force. The Siamese forts at the mouth of the river opened fire, but they were no match for the modern French warships, which smashed through the defenses and anchored in the heart of Bangkok, their cannons aimed at the Grand Palace. This was the moment of truth. A rash response, a call to arms, would have given France the perfect excuse for an all-out war and full colonization. Instead, Chulalongkorn, displaying incredible nerve, did the unexpected. He conceded. He paid a hefty indemnity and ceded more territory on the east bank of the Mekong. He lost the battle, but in doing so, won the war for survival. He avoided a catastrophic conflict he couldn't win. And crucially, his calculated capitulation sent a shockwave to London. He showed the British that an aggressive, unchecked France on the border of their possessions in Burma and Malaya was a direct threat to their own imperial interests. He expertly played the empires against each other, forcing them to the negotiating table. This delicate, painful, and brilliant dance of diplomacy, modernization, and sacrifice worked. In 1896, Britain and France formally signed an agreement guaranteeing the independence of the core of Siam as a neutral buffer state. When the dust settled on the colonial era, every single one of Siam's neighbors had been conquered. But on the map, one kingdom remained, sovereign and proud. So, was Thailand never colonized? The answer is a complex yes and no. It was never formally colonized. There was no British Raj, no French Indochina administration ruling from Bangkok. The Chakri dynasty remained on the throne. But to say it was completely untouched is wrong. For decades it was pressured, manipulated, and extorted. It lost its legal sovereignty over all foreign nationals on its soil through extraterritoriality. It lost its economic sovereignty, unable to set its own trade tariffs. It paid a heavy price in lost land, resources, and autonomy. What Thailand achieved wasn't a refusal to play the colonial game. It was becoming the smartest, most pragmatic player at the table. They chose negotiated semi-colonialism over outright conquest. They traded land for time, and they used that time to build a nation strong enough to reclaim its full independence in the 20th century. That legacy is why Thailand is so unique today. It's why it's the only country in Southeast Asia never to have had a foreign power fundamentally erase and replace its identity, its language, its legal system, and its institutions. It's why its history feels so continuous, its culture so intact. The Kingdom of Siam didn't just get lucky. It didn't stumble into freedom. It outthought, outmaneuvered, and outplayed the most powerful empires on Earth. It wasn't magic. It was statecraft of the highest order. As the 19th century drew to a close, tensions along the Mekong River were reaching a boiling point. The expanding French Empire, hungry for new territory after consolidating its grip on Indochina, set its sights on the eastern reaches of Siam, modern-day Laos, a region rich in resources and strategic value. The causes of the Franco-Siamese War of 1893 were rooted in both ambition and ambiguity. France claimed that Lao territory east of the Mekong belonged to its new colony. French Indochina Siam insisted on its centuries-old suzerainty. Skirmishes broke out along the border, with both sides accusing each other of provocation. But for France, these disputes were more than local quarrels. They were a pretext for expansion, and an opportunity to test Siam's resolve. In the summer of 1893, the crisis escalated dramatically. French gunboats, the Inconstant, the Comet, forced their way up the Chao Phraya River, a direct route to the heart of Siamese power. As the vessels approached the river's mouth at Paknam, Siamese forts opened fire. The exchange was brief, but violent. The modern French warships, armored and bristling with guns, easily overpowered the Siamese defenses and continued upriver, anchoring within sight of the Grand Palace in Bangkok itself. The message was unmistakable. France was prepared to use force to get what it wanted. The Paknam Incident triggered a full-blown diplomatic crisis, with French Marines landing in Bangkok and the French government issuing an ultimatum. Siam must cede all territory east of the Mekong, pay a crippling indemnity, and accept French control over key customs posts. The threat was clear: refuse and face total war. Across the globe, the world's newspapers watched as the fate of a kingdom hung in the balance. In London, British officials weighed their options. An outright conquest of Siam by France would leave British Burma and Malaya dangerously exposed. Behind closed doors, diplomats scrambled to avoid a wider conflict. Under intense pressure, King Chulalongkorn made the agonizing decision to accept the French demands. It was a bitter capitulation. Siam lost control of Laos and paid heavily in both prestige and treasure. But the king's calculation was clear. Survival was more important than pride. The aftermath of the Franco-Siamese War reshaped the map of Southeast Asia. Laos became part of French Indochina, and the Mekong River became a new imperial boundary. Siam's territorial losses were severe, but not fatal. Most crucially, the crisis forced Britain and France to recognize the value of Siam as a neutral buffer state. In 1896, both empires signed an agreement guaranteeing its core independence. For Siam, the war was a turning point, a painful lesson in the realities of power, but also proof that survival was possible through shrewd diplomacy and sacrifice. For its neighbors, it was a warning. The age of empires was ruthless, and only the most adaptable would endure. Archival maps fade into black, and the story of the impossible survivor continues. In the wake of the Franco-Siamese War, Siam stood at a crossroads. The bitter loss of territory exposed the kingdom's vulnerabilities, and the threat of foreign domination loomed. But that crisis ignited a determination to survive on its own terms. At the heart of this transformation stood King Chulalongkorn, Rama V. Recognizing the old ways could no longer protect his people, he set out to reshape Siam into a modern nation. Archival photographs flicker. The young king. Dignitaries in crisp Western-style uniforms. Bustling streets of early Bangkok. Chulalongkorn's reforms were sweeping and bold. One of his first acts was the gradual abolition of slavery and corvée labor. That decision began to redefine social relations across the kingdom. Archival records and census pages show the falling numbers of the enslaved. Royal decrees and newspaper headlines announced new freedoms. Next, the king turned his focus to the legal system. Drawing inspiration from Europe, he established new courts. He introduced a written legal code to replace patchwork traditional laws. Period photos show Siamese judges in Western-style robes, courtrooms filled with students and officials. Education, too, was transformed. New schools opened to boys and girls. Scholarships sent promising students abroad. Historical maps and education reports trace schools spreading from the capital to the provinces. Infrastructure projects reshaped the kingdom. The first railway snaked out from Bangkok. Steam locomotives linked distant provinces to the capital. Bridges, post offices, telegraph lines. Each stitched the nation closer and made Siam more resilient. Archival footage shows workers laying tracks, city streets buzz with new energy, but modernization was not without cost. Traditional hierarchies were upended. Not everyone welcomed the pace of change. Some clung to old rituals and local authority, others seized new opportunities in towns and cities. Archival photos show the growing urban middle class, women entering new professions, teachers, nurses, clerks. The gradual transformation of Thai society unfolds in period portraits and street scenes. Through vision, sacrifice, and relentless adaptation, King Chulalongkorn forged a new path. Siam would never be the same. It survived and even thrived as a beacon of independence. As images fade, the story of an impossible survivor continues. A nation remade by courage and change. As Siam pushed forward into the modern age, Stories about its royal family traveled far beyond its borders, and not always with accuracy. Western imagination, captivated by the exotic and unfamiliar, wove tales that blurred the line between reality and myth. Nowhere is this more evident than in the story of King Mongkut Rama IV and his son King Chulalongkorn. Film clips. The grand ballrooms and swirling costumes of The King and I, Yul Brynner's commanding presence, Deborah Kerr's hoop skirts. But while these images are iconic, they are far from the truth. In reality, King Mongkut was a highly educated monk before ascending the throne. He mastered multiple languages and corresponded with Western scientists. He introduced reforms long before Anna Leonowens set foot in Siam. Historical portraits show Mongkut in traditional robes, surrounded by scholars and maps, a man deeply curious about the world, but also fiercely protective of his kingdom's sovereignty. Archival images shift to King Chulalongkorn. Unlike his Hollywood depiction, he was not a child tutored by a foreign governess, but a determined reformer shaped by his father's vision and his own travels abroad. Letters, royal decrees, photographs, ornate manuscripts, royal regalia, temple murals. The real kings of Siam were not caricatures, but complex figures navigating a world of shifting power and relentless change, leaders who steered their nation through peril and possibility, leaving behind a heritage of resilience and adaptation. As the screen fades to black, we are reminded history is not a stage but a living story, forever shaped by those who dare to lead. Across Asia and Africa, the map of the colonial world was painted in the colors of distant empires. Yet a few nations stood apart, their borders never fully erased by foreign rule. Thailand, Japan, Ethiopia, 3 countries, 3 remarkable stories of resilience. Map transitions highlight Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the Horn of Africa. Japan, swept by the winds of Commodore Perry's black ships, launched the Meiji Restoration. In a matter of decades, it transformed from a feudal society into an industrial power, adopting Western technology and military organization at breathtaking speed. Japan's leaders chose to modernize on their own terms. And soon, Japan itself became an imperial force. Archival footage, Japanese railways. Archival footage, factories. Archival footage, naval fleets. Ethiopia, on the other hand, faced direct invasion. At the Battle of Adwa in 1896, Emperor Menelik II united his people, wielded modern weapons, and outmaneuvered the Italian army. Ethiopia's victory became a beacon of hope for colonized peoples everywhere, proof that resistance was possible. Archival footage, Ethiopian warriors. Archival footage, Adwa battlefield. Archival footage, Menelik II. Thailand's story is different. Unlike Japan's rapid industrialization or Ethiopia's battlefield triumph, Thailand's kings walked a diplomatic tightrope. They negotiated treaties, ceded borderlands, and played rival empires against each other, all to preserve the nation's core sovereignty. Modernization came not through conquest or total transformation, but through adaptation and compromise. Comparative graphics, treaty documents. Comparative graphics, shrinking borders. Comparative graphics, portrait of Rama IV. Comparative graphics, portrait of Rama V. What united these nations was their leaders' determination and strategic vision. But what set Thailand apart was its path, not through war or isolation, but through negotiation, reform, and the art of survival in a world of giants. As the maps settle, Thailand remains, a nation uncolonized, its independence hard-won, its story uniquely its own. Bold animated text appears center screen. Like and subscribe for more history videos. Enjoyed this journey through history? Hit like and subscribe for more amazing stories from the past, brought straight to your screen.